Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you guys doing today? This is Tasemere with the Blackout Live from New York. As you guys can see, I have an extra special guest with me today who we will be interviewing and learning all about the work that he's doing out in Baltimore. His name is David Chap. Loveless. I always have to say names slow so I don't mess them up. Just to start off the day, let's jump into what the segment is really about. The Blackout Live from New York. With me, your host, Tajmir's purpose is to celebrate Black folks across the diaspora and to have an open dialogue about Black economics, how we reimagine trends in business, and explore the magic that we have. So today, as I mentioned, we have a special guest, David Chap Loveless, who is the founder of Power Fest Baltimore. You can definitely visit powerfestbaltimore.org to learn more. Chap, thank you so much for joining me this morning. How are you?
My privilege. I'm well. I will shout out that I am the vice president of Power Fest. President, his name is Lewis Thomas. Fantastic guy to interview if you can get him on the show. I can probably help you with that. He was the first. Lewis was the first African American athlete racing motorcycles in Daytona. Surprisingly, not until the 2000s. He's from Baltimore. I would say he climbed the wrong side of the mountain to get to the top, and now he's returned to Baltimore, trying to show young men and lead young men how to get to this $6.4 billion industry the right way with support, because there's no black athletes, and it's a huge industry in Daytona riding motorcycles and across the nation. So, in Baltimore specifically, we actually have a culture of young men who are fantastic riding dirt bikes on asphalt, which is very different from
Mhm.
riding on dirt. And so we have this great pool of talent that no one's steering towards this industry. So whether you want to be whether you want to be like, you could be you don't necessarily have to ride motorcycles. You could be a mechanic. You could be a media guy. There's all kinds of different angles to get into this industry. But that's one of the things we do is Power Fest. I like your intro. Um, I love your intro because that's actually what I do out here. So a little bit about myself. I'm perceived as white. I've totally lived white privilege card my whole life. However, my grandfather's Native American. One of my great grandmother was from Sicily, and Sicilians, if you know your history, are mixed North African and Italian. So I know who I am and where I come from. I grew up in Baltimore, and I'm 43 years old now. Grew up in Baltimore City, and I'll say that to say that I was Baltimore's like Chocolate City. I know everybody calls DC Chocolate City, but they're 48% black. Baltimore is almost 70% black, so we are the real Chocolate City. But growing up as a white boy in the community, I saw a lot of unique things most white people don't see. Um, I will also say I have two mixed kids. I've married to a black lady in the South in Florida. I saw a lot of things white people have no idea what happens. We hear things, it's different to experience them. So, these things being said, I serve Baltimore City now as a volunteer chaplain. So, that's why everyone calls me Chap. I also serve in Baltimore City Public Schools. Up until COVID, I was serving at a juvenile detention centers. Um, Not sure where to go from there. I guess I always felt like I've been groomed to serve my kings and queens, my black brothers and sisters out here. And what's funny with that is that a couple years ago I got given the opportunity to work out of a rec center in Baltimore City, and they put me in some of the most, I don't like to use this word, but the most ghetto neighborhoods. And they're like, and I'm a white boy, that they don't know me, and they're like, oh, you're gonna have to go to McCullough Homes, and it's like, oh, that's cool, man. My aunt Jackie lives over there, right? Or they'd be like, oh, and then started moving me around because I was too comfortable. Like, it's almost like I was too comfortable. Like, we're gonna put you in Park Heights. I'm like, bet. I know Coach G, I know TJ and Teron. They're like, oh, we're gonna put you over in Cherry Hill. I'm like, man, I know Mr. Donnie and Mookie and all these guys. So I started like everywhere they put me, I was good because I'm from Baltimore, and even though I'm perceived as white, I'm from Baltimore 40 years, right? Baltimore's not like New York. We got a saying in New York, if somebody stepped on my foot on the bus stop at Times Square, I'll never see them again in my lifetime. But in Baltimore, if you stepped on my foot on the bus stop, I'm gonna see you 2 days later at the corner store in any neighborhood because it's just a small community. So that said, I have a lot of family everywhere, and Baltimore is really one big family. And so what they finally did was they put me in a rec center in Greektown. Now, Greektown used to be where all the Greek immigrants were pushed when we formed ghettos to control different immigrations coming into the city. But now they've done this new. Johns Hopkins owns a property called Bayview. Uh, I guess it's Bayview Hospital. They own a third party. As far as I know, all the nurses that work there, they got the name Hopkins, but Hopkins doesn't write their checks. There's like a level of like third partiness to protect them from liability and stuff. And historically, Hopkins, everyone knows the story of Henrietta Lacks. Hopefully, if you don't, please read about Henrietta Lacks. Those stories are all too true and all too common, where they have a history of experimenting on people of color. They'll say people of poverty, maybe, but people of color in Baltimore. And so over in Bayview, where they stuck me, was uniquely 95% Latino and mostly undocumented families. So I'm looking around like, where's all my black people? Like, shit. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't cuss, but I'm like really freaking out. I'm like, man, because I know for my life I've been groomed for serving my community and my family. And I was like, where's everybody at? I don't speak Spanish, But it was really unique that I was placed over there with my heart of service for people. And then that's a gift from God. Let me tell you that, first of all. Like, when I got over there and I'm like, where's all my people at? And through COVID, I was able to serve uniquely to the Latino community and specifically undocumented families, and learned some of the nuances of this whole time. They're not getting unemployment. They're not getting food stamps. They're not getting all the other programs that would proliferate from these qualifications. So we got a saying in Baltimore: "We all we got, we all we need." But it was very real for me, and very, very just upfront and real for serving that community directly. The way that the city congregated most of the Latino, I would say easily, without question, probably 85% of the Latino community lives in this area in Greektown, Southeast Baltimore. It's probably higher than that if you do the real stats. But I'll say that they're there because 10, 15 years ago, Hopkins told the state, when we partnered as a sanctuary city, that they put it out there that if you were undocumented and you had a baby, you could have it for free at this hospital. And then they went on to make some other things available. So basically, if you're undocumented, you make it to Baltimore and you get to Southeast and you live in a zip code, then you get free healthcare. So instantly, all the undocumented families congregated to this area, right? And so now you've created a new ghetto through policy instead of infrastructure. And interestingly enough, with the history Hopkins has, I don't trust that. Like, I can't say that I've seen evidence of anything, but I don't trust that, because now you have a new population of people who aren't recognized as citizens, don't have the same rights, don't have a voice, and are easily threatened with deportation, right? So do what you will with that information.
So I want this was a lot. This is a lot. I want to dissect certain things, because I could definitely go into a whole bunch of other topics, but I want to know from the beginning, what made you want to dedicate your life to public service? Public service is something that, is something that I feel you have to really have a burning desire to do, because you're not doing it for the money, that's for sure.
No.
But it's something that nags at you, because a lot of these different elements that you talked about shows how inhumane people can be against other people, right? And how there's different mindsets that folks have when they're placing different policies, different rules, different regulations, even how they talk about certain people, right, can really get underneath your skin, because you start to understand that the reason why a city or an institution is operating this way is really, for me, there's some level of finance in having poverty, right? Poverty keeps a lot of people paid. And so there isn't a lot of folks that actually want to solve this poverty issue or challenge, or accessibility issue or challenge. They want to do it in a way that kind of looks like they're solving it, but it creates all these other jobs, all these other streams, all these other solutions that aren't really solutions, right? So being someone that is in public service, how did you decide, like, okay, this is where I want to be? Because you could choose to be in other places, right? So what keeps you in public service? How do you keep yourself fed to continue to do this hard work when things look bleak? So I want to start from there, because we talked about a whole bunch of stuff, but for me, that I want to know.
Those are great questions. First of all, why do I do what I do? Trauma. I'm 100% traumatized kid from Baltimore. Despite my color, despite how you perceive me. Yeah. So experiencing trauma, and then being in a position of vulnerability where other people had to love me back on my feet, prepared me for service. Helped me understand its value deeply. It's one thing to make your kids go out and serve in a soup kitchen for an hour. It's another thing when they've been hungry for 3 days, right? So trauma develops that hunger to make sure everyone else is okay, because you understand, you can empathize, right? How do I survive? God. I've got nonstop testimony my entire life of God providing for me despite myself, and more than I deserve. To the point, um, and I will say, secondly, God has provided me with a strong and consistent wife. She's a ER registered nurse at Hopkins, which is ironic. However, we got a man on the inside. but she understands the politics, she understands the history, and she's there to make sure people are served and treated well and respectfully. That's kind of why I volunteer with the police as well. The chief who empowered me to do the program, same thing. He said, "Look, not all cops are bad. We know that, but we need to have a presence, a spiritual, faith-based presence, um, just to hold people accountable, right? If I'm in the car and I'm not an ordained priest or minister or a rabbi, but the title chaplain carries an assumption, and we let them assume that I'm a man of faith. I love Jesus. I love people. I love my people. I love my city. Um, but I'll sit and ride along with the police, and they'll assume I'm a priest. And of course, if a priest is sitting next to you at work, you're gonna act different, right? So they're going to act a little more professional with our community, and they're going to treat them more respectfully. Hopefully, not all the time. I've been in a car and I've seen things that have made me say, like, "What are you doing when a chaplain's not in the car?" Right? So there's those things, but definitely God sustains me to the point of absurdity. Um, at the end of September, I quit my job with Parks and Recs that I was sharing about, because the politics at even an entry level position was so burdensome and so cumbersome. I worked at a rec center for 2 years, and they couldn't provide us a printer in 2 years. Just a simple, like, $200 printer. No. Um, they want to stay open, like you said, to get that money to justify that budget, but they don't want people in the recs because it's a liability, especially during COVID. But if they say that we got 40 recs open and they're doing all this stuff, then nobody's fact checking. Everybody's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah." And so they're getting money, they're getting budgets, they're getting $1 million grants from federal grants and stuff. And then You can write programs and you can apply for stuff, but and maybe I just wasn't good at writing the programs. But I'm a community guy. I serve the community like every day, and I thought, what a great marriage of hats, like a volunteer, community organizer, activist, and then boom, now I got a rec center to operate out of. I thought I'm gonna change the world, right? Now the system is set up that you're not going to do it from the inside ever. And so we got to understand that the system works the way it's supposed to work, not the way they want you to think it works.
And so I want to put a pin right there because
Okay.
I'm someone that, so I think I have shared with many people on this platform, but just in talking, that I am an urban planner, urban studies person by profession, right? And
Okay.
I also chose to work in public service until I was like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go create my own business and do it how I want to do it, because when you are trying to infiltrate different systems that were designed to serve a specific purpose, right? They were not designed to give access. The best way that I explain it to folks is like this whole cage-free chicken nonsense, right? So I'm like, okay, so you think that the chicken is like grass-fed, but the chicken just has access to seeing the grass. It doesn't mean that they can actually walk on that grass. They just see it, right? So there's like a different perception between like having access to really touching something, or someone just saying like, hey, this is what we're doing, right? And so oftentimes what I have found in doing work throughout New York City is that the people that are doing the work aren't native. And that is also a challenge, right? Because if you have people that are coming from other places that have not really embedded themselves into understanding the community and what the people feel like they need, you have these antidotes that don't work, right? Because people
Okay.
are coming here with like their own preconceived on paper, this should work. So fighting against that and having enough people that can stand up and say, no, that's not right. No, that is actually not what we need. The perception that you see is like a forced perception, right? Like this is something that has been embedded into your mind to think that people that live in this place look, feel, act like this, but you haven't interacted in a meaningful way to know that that's complete like opposite, right? So I think that for me was one of the challenges that I constantly had, and I was in positions where it's again the access to speak up, but not really being able to speak up, because you can speak up, but no one hears, so you don't change
Right.
policy, right? Instead, you get labeled as the person that is the troublemaker. You're pushing things. You don't
And
understand things,
and then
right?
no one wants to help you if you're the
No one wants
troublemaker.
no one wants to be around because people are concerned about, securing that paycheck. That weekly or biweekly paycheck says that I need to like shut up and just push the paper, right? So I think that there's like a lot that happens in public service, and people think that it's a mix between having power, but it's also a lot of informal power, right? Because as a chaplain, to your point, I'm going to respect the chaplain way more if I know this person is a chaplain because of that, what that title holds, right? So how to leverage certain things. So I think that is totally, totally amazing. So now let's get, look, you talked
Well,
about
yeah,
power fest.
let me answer your one question real quick. So when I shared that I resigned from the city, to answer your first question, I was trying to share an example. I take the long way around answers. I'm a storyteller, but I was trying to share an answer of how do I feed the family? How do I survive this and that? So God always provides in the most absurd and bizarre ways, and I say that because 2 days after I resigned from Parks and Recs, I now let me say I have no aspirations of ever being an actor or anything like that. 2 days after, HBO called me because they needed a white boy to do some scenes on the West Side, and they heard about me because I'm the white boy on the West Side. And I turned that one day of shooting into an opportunity of just through being professional, having integrity, and just showing up on time and following directions, just really just being professional on set. I filmed like 8 days in this HBO film. So like people ask like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, it sounds almost corny. It's like, well, I'm an actor, right? Because I'm getting paid to be a background actor. Like the first day I was a biker. Then one day I was a protester. One day, like I shaved my beard, but I had this really long beard. I was a Muslim dude. One day I had to shave because I did a lawyer scene. I was a detective. They've used my car. So just to say that God provided for me when I walked away from that job in faith with with really no directions, kind of irresponsibly for an adult. God was like, "It's okay, I got you," and like immediately put this in my path to be working for the next 2 months. I've been filming with HBO, and so I don't know what's next, but He always provides, and I walk confidently in that. I'm never like insecure or anxious about it. Um, so to your next question about Power Fest, we're very familiar as an organization with the culture, with how the system oppresses people. You know, the system, not to be a conspiracy guy, but how systems in place in our world keep people poor. There's money in poverty, right? You said that. There's money in homelessness. There's money in hunger. There's money in um, all these systems is kind of driven by money. We understand that there's needs, and sometimes there's needs that aren't being met. Like you're really hitting my heartstrings when you're talking about out of town people coming in with solutions. So in Baltimore, which we're on record for a record high in murders again this year. Um, and it's odd because we have groups like Ceasefire. You're called Ceasefire. You're from. Let me get this one right. Ceasefire's from Chicago. This ain't Chicago. And you got an organization that's writing checks you can't cash because ain't nobody ceased firing, but they're getting all the money. You got groups like Safe Streets. Safe Streets, I would sit back on the corner with officers in the car when we're on patrol. We'd watch these guys in Safe Streets. They're from New York. Um, and we watch them hire people from Baltimore, ex-offenders, because they think ex-offenders have the relationships with people to mediate. Well, so do I. I mean, I'm an ex-offender, but I don't, whatever. And they actually offered me a job, and I had said no, thank you at the time. But he got these guys from New York came in with Safe Streets, and then we watched their employees sit on a corner and run this whole drug ring at different corners on markets and different neighborhoods. Like we just sit back and watch them, and the police officer I'm with is like, "Look at this, man! Like we can't even do nothing because they're contracted mediators with the city. There's no point, this and that." And they eventually got in trouble and got caught, but my streets ain't safe, and you're making it worse. This being known that that there was a drug ring, 3 men were indicted for this whole drug culture that they're creating through the Safe Streets. How about the city still gave Safe Streets millions of dollars this year with those things being known? So it's all about the money. Again, like I kind of joke about those two groups because they're trying, but they're writing checks they can't cash. I mean, the boots on the ground people are trying, but in the end, they're about the money. I had a lady. I was filming on set at HBO. We have real police guarding the set because we're filming a police corruption show called We Own This City. It's based on a book, and so we have people that are dressed like real police. So we have real police guarding the set so that no one mistakes the real police or intimidates them and stuff. Hey, out. And this lady in a Safe Streets shirt just got off her doing a Safe Streets work for the day. She gets off the bus. She comes over and starts beefing with security, like starts a fight with security in front of the police. And I'm like, you're Safe Streets. You're still wearing your uniform, honey. Go home, change your shirt, come back. And, if you need to fight, come back and fight, but don't do it in your uniform. Right. So we got people that all the time come out of town and serve. Those are just 2 big ones that we deal with right now. That you don't have problems in your own city, and maybe you do, and maybe you served those problems in your city, but Baltimore is not your city. Just like I wouldn't go take our homegrown stuff and take those solutions to Chicago. I wouldn't take it to LA, Atlanta, New York, because if I don't have relationships there, I don't understand the problems there, then I definitely don't understand the solutions. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
I had to mute because I didn't want my background noise to interrupt what you were saying, but I feel like from an urban studies practitioner perspective, that's where things always go wrong, right? Because you also, it's very American of us when we do that. It's almost like I know better for you than you know for yourself, so I'm going to come prescribe something for you, right? So it's a very American of us when we do that to each other, but it's also very unnecessary because you do have people in the community that are from there that know what's really happening.
Yes.
So if you have a desire to say gun violence is my mission and my passion in life, right? And I want to work in different cities and different areas, then it would only be to your benefit to seek out people that might already be doing that work and see how you can fit in to amplify the work that they're doing, right?
That's a great message. Yeah.
Versus saying, hey, I'm going to bring my methodology from another city, which we all know that policing in different cities, in different communities can look and feel a lot different, right? So there isn't one antidote for what you're doing. But this is what happens because in these groups, like, we don't need to create another nonprofit. I wish the IRS would stop giving people these 501c3s because we have enough 501c3s that are duplicating the same exact mission, same exact work, and we still do not have any results.
So that's what PowerFest is about. I'll shoot some stats at you real quick, because that kind of leads. That's a great segue into PowerFest. Baltimore City has almost 40,000 nonprofit. Not Baltimore City, but Maryland has almost 40,000 nonprofits. It's around 30,000 something. That's one nonprofit for every 187 people. I think. You think we'd be in better shape? That's 10,000 more nonprofits than there are retails in Maryland. I think we'd be in better shape. We have a ton of nonprofits. We have a ton of people doing good stuff. Ton of homegrown, boots on the ground, like people that are serving low hanging fruit, and they're making a difference in people's lives. But I think at the heart of it, to really instill change, you need to build relationships. You need to love people. You know, the president of PowerFest has a joke. He says, "Nobody ever shot nobody eating a snowball or eating a slushie, right? You never sitting there eating a snowball or ice cream and you shot somebody, right?" So he recognizes the little things, the little nuances that steer people away from the direction they're going that leads them to pulling the trigger. I know that the violence, the crime violence, and the gun crime violence specifically was part of the motivating factor to bring PowerFest, which has been a successful festival in Orlando and in Florida, to bring it to Baltimore. Now, Lou is from Baltimore. Lewis Thomas was from Baltimore. He has done the PowerFest in Florida. So, but as we're talking about being from out of town, he's not. And so he saw a
Mm-hmm.
solution that he's been cultivating for well over 5 years now to make sure it fits Baltimore appropriately. The purpose of PowerFest, is like a 1 day, all day festival, and it's pretty big. It's we have a national stage where we before COVID hit, we were reaching out to like I was reaching out to people like Mesa, Stevie Wonder. I was trying to get Kem, like really national artists. This is just one area. So like we have a stage for people to want to come hear music, but it's not a music festival per se. We have a women's empowerment encampment, because we have a ton of like women's empowerment and Black women's business association, all these really great nonprofits in Baltimore that like they're all doing their own thing. Like, good Lord, put them together, man. You know what I mean? Like, oh my. So we have a basketball portion called Shoot Hoops Not Guns, right? And so the idea is that people can come and, if you enjoy hoops, come enjoy this, this basketball portion. But we got away from the dunk contest because Power Fest is all about evening the playing field, right? So a 4-year-old, I know 5-year-olds that can shoot better than Shaq, but they can't dunk. So if we do a shoot contest, you can have a 4-year-old, you can have an 84-year-old, everybody can shoot. So so that's the concept of everything we do is intentionally leveling the playing field. We have a exotic car show. We know guys in Baltimore with Bugattis, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, 1937 like Chevys. Like we have all these eccentric cars. So a car show, same thing. The car show portion, you can be a homeless drug addict walking right down the street, or you can be a billionaire. Elon Musk can show up and they can stand next to the same vehicle and they can both in that moment appreciate and have something in common, right? Levels of playing field. So all the things we have to entertain, we have a kids zone. Everything we have to entertain is intentional to kind of show people like we're all the same. We're all on the same level. Treat everyone the same. Just love on people. And then the angle, if you will, the hook. And I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble with Lou for spilling all the beans because we haven't been able to do the festival yet. And if somebody else takes the idea and runs with it, then that's God, man. But the idea is to get to all this entertainment, to get to whatever you showed up to see. And in the food court, oh my gosh, we have hundreds of like fantastic food trucks in Baltimore. As many as we can get in the place, we're gonna get in there. Because I love food. I love food. But the idea is whatever you came for, whatever drew you to the festival, you'll have the opportunity to navigate a resource village full of resources in Baltimore City specifically that you didn't know you had.
But that sounds awesome, right?
Yeah.
And to my earlier point, if someone is coming from outside of Baltimore and they say, "Oh my gosh, Power Fest is like where I need to be," then the thought should be, how do I partner? How do I collaborate? How can I share some of my talent, some of my programming with another institution that already exists? Because the name of the game in nonprofit is that everyone is going after the same funding pool, right? There's grants, there's philanthropy groups, and so now you start attacking each other because everyone wants to get this money because everyone wants to pay, their staff. So you wind up having a lot of the funds actually going into paying salaries versus doing the actual work. So if you could say, I want to partner and collaborate to do the work, then you'll start getting some deliverables done. But if everyone is just trying to make a paycheck for themselves and their staff, this is where the problem comes out. Because if you get, let's take a small number, you get $100,000 and $70,000 is in salaries, you ain't got that much money left over to do a program.
No, and I'll comment on that. When I was a kid, I remember this vividly. I wasn't more than 6 years old. Back in the day, when we had the old corded phones in the home, telemarketers would call to raise money for everything. Like if you had a nonprofit, they'd hire telemarketers to call you and get donations. And I distinctly remember my father being shrewd and from Baltimore City, from Southeast Port Street. He would say to them, "Really, how much of the money I donate goes to the actual resource you're delivering?" And 100% of them would say like less than 10%. And he made sure I heard those conversations and I was aware of that. And I don't know why. I didn't know why as a kid. I'm like, oh, okay. So we don't give money to people like that because they spend it on themselves and not the people. Okay. So who knew like 40 years later, right? But I also say that in Baltimore, when you're in the streets and you're the doer, we all know who those people are. We all know who the and let me share. I'd like to share an experience with you that revealed to me the value of not and really amplified the message in Baltimore of we all we got, we all we need. We try not to ask the city for nothing. We try not to partner with them just because of the cumbersomeness of the policies. Like if I wanted to do a picnic tomorrow at Parks and Recs, it would take me 8 months to get through the process.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just showing up and doing it. But if I show up and do it, I can get fines, I can get all kinds. So don't get me started. But my experience was this with there's an organization, I won't name it, but they were offering $1 million grant, $250,000 a year for 4 years. And this is just my personal experience. I didn't see everything going on in the background, so I can't. It's not like I can't testify to everything, but this is my experience from my end applying for this. We seem to be, in our perception, lead applicant for this grant, the entire process. Um, with that being said, we spent weeks taking all of our time. I mean, like 8 hours a day, making sure everything was in order, doing the process professionally. So everything we do with PowerFest, we do what's in front of us with excellence. And so if we're on a mission to get a grant, that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it, with excellence. So we're all in. We're doing this process, and we get so far into the process, and everything's looking really good. And then there were amendments made to the eligibility requirements that disqualified us after the process had begun, and disqualified other organizations as well, because the entity giving the donation already knew who they wanted to give it to, in my opinion. It's not a fact. In my opinion, and I'm not stupid, I'll tell y'all right now, like I'm from Baltimore, but I was a nuclear power plant mechanical engineer on submarines. So I say that because I don't have a lot of credibility as far as like education. I barely got my high school diploma. I tried to go to college a bunch. I don't have ordination papers, but I just say that to say I'm not stupid. I've been out here 40 years in Baltimore. So what the point of my story is, though, that we spent 40 plus hours a week trying to lock in this money so that we could better serve the community. That process took away from serving the community. When we looked back, we're like, wow, we haven't done a food thing. We haven't done this or that in like 3 or 4 weeks. Like, we got to stop. So it was super discouraging to see how the politics played out for grants and stuff like that. But it also was super, enlightening to see how the politics played out in that. So I already know if somebody didn't tell me, hey, we're writing this grant for you, do the process, don't do it. Because the guys that get all the money are the guys who are chasing all the money, and the people who are making change are the people who are making change. And yes, it comes out of your pocket, but it's not really your pocket, and it's not really your money. If you have faith, you know that it's God's money, and that God is the infinite source. So you give everything you got, you won't run out. I promise you won't run out. I told you guys about the job with HBO. I'll tell you another one. I'm out here running around in the 90s, CRV, hoopty, different panels on it, like barely running. Like when I change the oil, the little thing comes apart. I got to put it like it's a hoopty, man. But I'm from Baltimore. That's my comfort zone because I grew up trauma. So hoopties are the norm. I've never had a good car in my life. I've never paid for a car. I've always, like, that's another testimony. From the time I was 16, I think I paid $1 for my first car from someone at church. I've always had wheels. And to that point, I'm running around the city trying to serve everybody in this crummy old 90s CRV. And the community donated a budget for us to get. So it's weird how it worked out. But basically, my role in testimony now is I drive a 2006 gold Humvee, or a Hummer H3, not a Humvee, but a H3. And people were like, "Oh my gosh, you got an H3," And so it, like, again, with like when you said with the chaplain, you give a certain amount of respect. I didn't understand, like, driving that car. I got a different perception from people and a different kind of respect. And I was like, I couldn't claim it. I'm like, God gave me this, man. Like, the community gave me a Hummer. Like, that doesn't even make sense, right? But that's just my testimony to your point of how do you survive. If you do what God puts in front of you with excellence and integrity, He's got you. I got a real nice, I wouldn't say a real nice home, but I got a home. I got a house. I have a H3 I drive around because of God. I have a job because of God. Like, everything that's provided to me, it's because I walk in the path He's put in front of me. And it's pretty simple, but it's not easy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. It definitely makes sense, because if you're doing the work, if you're walking in your purpose and you're doing it Even when it looks bleak, you're still like, I'ma still do this right here.
You know what
And
I'm
there's no way that you could really fail at what you're doing, because once you reach the obstacle, the solution is going to come to you of
meet you there.
what it is that you need to do, right? And that's why, going back to our point about outsiders coming into communities that they don't understand, that's one of the reasons why you're not able to make deliverables, because you're not walking in the actual purpose. You're chasing after the financial gains or the power that comes with doing what it is that you're doing, instead of focused on the people that you're serving. And people know this, right? We are creatures where we know when someone is doing something because this is their lane, and this is what they love to do, and this is what they're great at doing, versus they're doing smoke and mirrors, trying to get you to think that there's something that they're not. And
Yes.
then underneath it all, they're trying to figure out how to get a bigger check, right? And so we know when that happens, and that happens throughout the world, right? And this is why certain things work for some people, and then some people try to take that same blueprint and apply it to what it is that they're doing, and it's always an epic fail, because you started off doing it from the wrong point and from the wrong place. So
We
there's
say
no
we say doing the
good.
right thing for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, there's no good that's going to come from it, because I've been at organizations that have gone through different processes to get grants, and you spend a lot of time on compliance, on record keeping, on writing reports, and not as much time and not as much energy on the deliverables that you wanted to do. And that's because it's designed that you might not reach those deliverables. It's almost intentional, because if every month I have you writing a report, and then I have you submitting this paperwork, and I have you submitting that paperwork, when do you have time to reach these 10 things that you said you were going to be able to do? You don't, because even if you hire someone else, you got to pay fringe benefits, you got to pay health insurance, your liability increases. So now to hire this one person at 40K really costs you 80K, because of all this back end office supplies and all these things that you don't necessarily take into consideration. So you think it's a big number, but it winds up not being enough. And systems understand that. And so until we start to think about how we can work outside of different confines to make the impact that we want to make, we're going to be in this hamster wheel going
Well,
like this. And the
no,
policies are going to change. To your point, I just had a baby not too long ago, and it's hard. Being a woman trying to give birth in America, because I can only talk about America, the systems are not designed to give you the same kind of love, attention, compassion, sympathy as other people. So you're always on the front line of advocating and fighting for what you want to do with your own body, right? It's just mind blowing. I heard that Black women have a harder time giving birth, but until I actually had to go through that system, I didn't necessarily understand how challenging it can be. Like, just growing a human is hard, but then going through this process to delivering this human is even harder, because they don't think that you really are in pain the way that you say that you are.
let me
They
share something
turn
with
you
you.
around.
Especially because I have two mixed kids. Especially if you're a woman of color, because of the perception is you're so strong and you're so tough and you're so blah blah blah. You get treated so differently in the hospital, bro. My wife works in the hospital. I was married to a Black woman. Yeah, yeah. Like, you hit me when you said that. Like,
It's so
yeah.
hard. I mean, maybe I'm sharing too much, but I had to have my baby early, and the doctor literally said, like, you have to have this baby today. I get to the hospital and they say, listen, we don't have any space for you. So you're going to have to go home and then we're going to call you when we have made room. And I was just like, that can't happen. Like that's
Wow.
not what's going to happen. So I wind up staying, and then because I stayed, now it's an experiment. It's like, oh, okay, so now that you're still here, we want to know if you would want to be part of this study that we're conducting, and we don't have enough Black women that are part of this study. Can you offer yourself to be part of the study? And when I declined, it was an attitude like, how dare you not
Right.
want to offer your body to what I'm telling you that I want to do? It's just nonsense that just happens, that makes you really question, like, what is really happening when we quote things like the land of the free, the home of the brave. Like, what does this really mean? And then the perception of what it means to other people that aren't necessarily experiencing this, and they think that we are such a great place, and we got pockets that we need to fill. I always say we got enough problems in our states here that if we just looked internally, we have so much work that we could do.
I agree.
Instead of being so American and judging other people for their shortcomings, we should probably look internally and figure out how can we make life better for the people that live here on this land before we try to prescribe, prescriptions that we know don't work. And then it's also very interesting that we as just humans here do the same thing to other people, which is why I love that you said we have to start with loving people. Because once you love this person, you look at them so differently than you did before.
Yeah, and let me say that that's a big pet peeve of mine. Let me back up to a comment you said about your purpose. That's kind of my 2-second sales pitch when people ask me about the logo for PowerFest. It's an outlet, but usually the ground is facing the other way. So we flip the ground, right? So we change one small detail and it changed the whole perception. Now it looks like a smiley face. One small detail changed all that, right? The other thing is why a power plug. And I tell people, like, if you ever tried to use a toaster that's not plugged in, it doesn't work, right? But if we can, through PowerFest, if we can plug people into the source, then they're able to serve their purpose. So very basic there.
It's not basic. It's very profound if someone actually tries to do it. It sounds very simple, but simple things are often hard to do.
It's true. And that's the system we live under, yeah.
So
I'm
any
still
final
soaking. I'm still
thoughts?
soaking in everything you said. You gave a lot of information, a lot of good information.
Any final thoughts? I love this. My network mate Chap here has a show on Monday nights called Shared Spaces
Sure.
at 7,
Yeah,
right?
so let me plug that, I guess. Let me plug that. If anyone from Baltimore is watching, and of course we always welcome guests from other states, but Baltimore City specifically, me and my partner Laquita Chansey from smalltimorehomes.org. She serves homelessness by building micro shelters and offering resources and stuff. We're partners on the show, and we are out in the community constantly building relationships and loving people. Like you said, it's one of my pet peeves. I wanted to back up real quick. Is that not enough of our community representatives, because they're not leaders. Your council people, your mayor, your president, they're under the misconception they're the leaders. We are the leaders. Taz is a leader. I'm the leader. People watching, you guys are the leaders. You allow the representatives, no matter who it is in office, you elected them. They represent us. We're the leaders. We have the power, not them. So keep that in mind. But PowerFest, we're in the community building relationships and loving on people. And that's where I was going with that. It's not enough of our representatives when they're talking to the media. You never hear the mayor say, I love you. Then why are you my mayor? If you don't love me, why are you representing me? Right? So we're out there loving people. And Shared Spaces is a space where me coming up as perceived as white in Baltimore, I know my role as a super ally. I know it's not my story to tell. I know it's not my mic to usurp and say, oh, black people are being treated bad. It's not, no, no, no. My role is to take all my resources, give my people the mic, and turn up the volume. And so that's what Donnie has allowed me to do with the show. And so it's called Shared Spaces, because anybody who needs to share a truth, their truth, we give them the mic. So you never know who you're going to get on the show, but it's Baltimore centric, but we always welcome outside people to come and comment, because some people experience Baltimore too. Some people have a heart for Baltimore. So we're not exclusive, but it's just a
So
great
how
place.
did you meet Donnie? Give me the tea.
I
Spill
will
the
give you the
tea.
PG version, okay? Because it was not PG. I was down in the hood of hoods, the biggest open air drug market on the East Coast, Pensy Ave and Lawrence, which, mind you, as a product of oppression and systemic racism, used to be Black Wall Street in Baltimore. When I tell you the theater that they deal drugs out of now used to host shows with like the OJs, Marvin Gaye, and like all Motown would be on one ticket in this
Ooh.
spot. It was the spot. Pensy Ave, historic Pensy Ave was a spot. And so, and when they poured drugs into it and dismantled Black Wall Street through drugs and other policies, right? So anyway, so I'm as a chaplain, it's one of my favorite places to go because people are so honest and broken there. And there's no BS, man. It's just it can be perceived as a depressing place, but there's all love there. But it's very dangerous. It's very much open drug culture, this and that. So we had organized a parade. My brothers and Evan Anderson and Officer Chuck Lee, they had organized a parade, and I was there to support. And I'm walking up and down the avenue, and this little thug, old OG thug, walks up to me and says, "Who are you? What are you doing in my neighborhood?" And I look back at him. I said, "Who are you? What are you doing in my neighborhood?" And he looks me up and down like, "White boy, what?" And but like after that, we were brothers, man, because I ain't let him bully me, because even though I'm perceived as white, like Baltimore is as much my city, every inch of it, as it is Donnie's. I don't care if I'm sitting on his stoop. That's my stoop too. And that's how I treat everybody. I treat everybody like family. And if you bully me, I'll bully you back. But I'm not a bully. I'm a lover, not a fighter, man. But honestly, that's how we met. He kind of bullied me like, "Who are you?" And I just gave it back to him like, "Who are you? I ain't never seen you before." He's like, "I ain't never seen you before," So it was like little attitude-ish. But that's Baltimore. It's not. It didn't escalate into violence, right? It was a love thing. Like, I love Donnie. He's my brother because of that. Because we come from a generation that respected that. We talk a certain way to each other, but it was respect and love, not out of hate and anger, right? So, yeah, he's my brother, man, and ever since I met him, we met like that, and then it's all history after that.
Daddy definitely has a way of keeping you on your toes. And he keeps you honest because he's
Yep.
going to give it to you like nobody else can give it to you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Chap. You are welcome back anytime on the Blackout Live from New York. I had such a great time. We
Thank you.
got a lot more stuff to dissect and
Oh,
uncover
please,
about
yeah.
what's happening in your city, what's happening here in New York, because it ain't so
Oh,
light camera action all the
oh yeah. And
time.
if anybody's watching, Dr. Kennedy, we need Dr. Kennedy. The Harlem, what's it? The Harlem daycare. Dr. Kennedy, we need him on the show.
I am going to work on that. You have given me this charge before. I am going to try my best
All right.
to work on getting him on the show. I mean, New York City is a whole nother beast all in itself with different pockets of nuances going on. So we have a lot to talk about. But for today, we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about purpose. We talked about God. We talked about walking in your purpose, you being on HBO. Oh my gosh, I need your autograph now because you're about to be famous and blow up.
I'm
I
work
might
on
see you on the what is it called, the Oscars or something like that. Um, but join me every Saturday at 10:15, the Blackout Live from New York. Also, be sure to tune in to Shared Spaces Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on blacknews.usa's Facebook page, YouTube page. Make sure that you subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you later. Ciao.